I married the person I liked the most, though he didn't love me. I thought that someday, I could at least become a habit of his. However, the days and nights we spent together after marriage couldn't compete with the news of his first love's divorce. This time, I decided to let go. The number you have dialed is busy. Please try again later. I turned off my phone and laughed at myself self-deprecatingly. It had just rung twice. How could it be busy? Jason, even the busy tone knows how to comfort me. Why won't you just pick up the phone? I got up and walked towards the balcony. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the brightly lit intersections and streets below. There were people everywhere, the hustle and bustle of daily life everywhere, and the mundane world everywhere. I raised my hand and turned off the last light in the house. The surroundings were instantly plunged into darkness. I didn't want to leave the warm yellow light on and let this house hide among countless families enjoying their happy get-togethers, pretending to be as lively as them. I think I no longer want to deceive myself. I'm really exhausted. In the silent darkness, I walked back to the room barefoot and started packing my things. It was just getting light when I completely erased all traces of my life here. With the exhaustion of a sleepless night, I dragged my suitcase and left this place. The moment I locked the door, I heard myself whisper, "Goodbye." After getting into a taxi, I took out my phone. Looking at the one-sided conversation flooding the chat interface, I smiled bitterly and then sent a WeChat message to Jason. Meet me at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Remember to bring the marriage certificate, your ID card, and the divorce agreement you drafted before. Although he had been ignoring my previous messages, he should read this good news. Just as I was about to turn off my phone and take a short nap, the phone suddenly rang. It was Jason. In the past, I used to envy those girls whose boyfriends would reply instantly or even call them directly as soon as they sent a message. Now that I finally experienced it, it was in such a situation. I picked up the phone. "Hello? Luna, what's wrong?" His voice sounded a bit dull on the other end. I could tell he wasn't in a good mood. "Jason, I don't want to be with you anymore. The abyss is too dark. You can stay there alone. I'm tired. I'll let you go on myself too." My tone was extremely weak. Somehow, it took me a lot of effort to say these words. Without waiting for his reply, I hung up the phone. I should be decisive. After loving Jason for so many years, I almost lost myself. Jason was my college classmate. He was the campus heartthrob of our college and was even recognized by the dean as the most handsome campus heartthrob during his 20-year tenure. The first time I saw him was at the school anniversary party. I was helping backstage at that time. He was the host and had just finished announcing a program and returned backstage. When he lifted the curtain and came in, I was helping a girl who was about to go on stage to zip up her dress. I looked up and saw him. I swear that in all my years, except for my best friend Lucy's younger brother, no one could compare with him in looks. He was wearing a black suit, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. He had an excellent figure. Suddenly, he looked over here. I didn't have time to look away and just met his gaze. He had a pair of beautiful eyes. They were so beautiful that they could drive away everything else in my sight. The world seemed to flicker for a moment. That was the beginning of my falling for him. I was absent-minded for the whole second half of the show. I saw him put a coat on the girl who had just played the piano. There was tenderness in his eyes. I was a bit dazed by that affectionate look. Looking back on it later, it was really ridiculous. The thing that made me fall for him at first was his tenderness towards another girl. The girl he liked was Selena. After that day, I inquired about everything I could about the two of them. Stories of childhood sweethearts, of a perfect match, of deep love but little fate, of unrequited love. They were all about them. Selena had a boyfriend. Jason was unrequitedly in love with her. What was going on? How could Selena not want someone as good as Jason? Just thinking about it made my heart ache. I'm the kind of person who would go after someone if I liked them. So after getting useful information, I started chasing Jason relentlessly. Figuring out his class schedule was the basic operation. I almost always waited downstairs in his dormitory just to be able to sit with him. Taking advantage of being both class monitors, I would strike up conversations with various reasons of discussing work progress during grade meetings. On him, I used all the plot lines of developing feelings between the male and female protagonists that I had seen in romance novels and TV dramas and successfully became his good friend. He wasn't a talkative person, but he was easily made to laugh by me. I also liked it when he laughed because he looked really good when he smiled. One day, he was suddenly in a good mood and invited me to dinner, saying that I had invited him too many times and he felt embarrassed. I was a bit flattered. After all, it was the first time he had taken the initiative to ask me. Later, I found out that it was because Selena had broken up with her boyfriend. I was down for a while and didn't go to see him. But soon I heard that Selena and her boyfriend had gotten back together. I knew he would probably be sad. At that time, I was working on the final paper for an elective course. His roommate sent me a message saying that Jason was drunk. I immediately dropped the paper and went out. When I got to the restaurant, he was already drunk out of his mind. I quickly went over to help him up. Jason, wake up. He looked at me with blurry eyes. Selena? You're here. I shook him. Look clearly. I'm Luna. He stared at me for a while. Suddenly, his face moved closer. The next second, something cool and soft covered my lips. He kissed me. My pupils dilated. I wanted to push him away, but looking at that face so close to mine, I didn't want to push him away anymore. I decided to be selfish for once and let myself indulge in his embrace. The next day, he suddenly called me. My heart was pounding. I always had a strange premonition. Luna. His voice still smelled of a hangover. Yes. I counted my heartbeats one by one. Let's be together. It was clearly a confession, but he managed to make it sound like a compromise. I almost instantly knew that he hadn't blacked out. He remembered what had happened last night. It was just a kiss. You don't have to be responsible. I tried to make my tone sound casual. Luna, do you like me? He suddenly asked. You already knew that. I smiled. Then let's be together. He used a suggestive sentence pattern but with an unrefusable tone. Are you sure? I asked. Yes. Maybe I need to start a new life. I was happy when I heard this. At least, he was ready to let go of Selena. At least, the fact that he chose me meant that I was a little different. When he said he would be my boyfriend, he was actually more attentive than I expected. He would have dinner with me every day, send me back to my dormitory, help me with my studies during exam weeks, run to bring me an umbrella on rainy days, and squat down to tie my shoelaces. When all the tenderness that I had once envied was poured on me, I was only immersed in the happiness of my dream coming true and deliberately ignored the love that didn't reach his eyes. Just because I ignored it didn't mean I didn't care. But I knew that this kind of thing couldn't be rushed. Sometimes, he would also tell me about his past with Selena. At those times, he would always become extremely vulnerable, with melancholy flowing all over his body. Later, I don't remember from which day on, the number of times he mentioned Selena became fewer and fewer until I thought he had completely let go and started to like me. Until one time at a class reunion, he had too much to drink. When I was helping him home, he mumbled Selena in a daze. I suddenly felt as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. Today, I knew that Selena got married. I sent him back to his home. Just as I was about to leave, he who had been slumped on the sofa suddenly grabbed my hand. Luna, let's get married. I shook off his hand. You're drunk. He shook his head. I'm very sober. I ignored him and left directly. The next day when he picked me up from work, he was holding a bouquet of flowers in his hand. I was a bit surprised. He never did these kinds of things before. It wasn't until I saw him take out a ring and get down on one knee under the collective gaze of the people around us that I realized what he had said last night was true. Marry me, Luna. His face looked dazzling in the light of the setting sun, as if all the brilliant light in the world was contained in those eyes. Unfortunately, no matter how devout his eyes looked, there was not a trace of affection in them. I tremblingly stretched out my hand. He slowly slipped the ring onto my finger, and finally, a single tear rolled down my cheek. I wasn't crying because I was overjoyed but because I felt sorry for myself. What on earth was I to him? A springboard that happened to be suitable for helping him get out of the abyss of the past? And what was marriage? A joke out of pique? Although I was filled with a sense of defeat in my heart, after marrying him, I still wholeheartedly played the role of his wife. I would bring him meals to the company on time every day. Whether he ate them or not, I would sit on the sofa waiting for him to come back no matter how late it was at night, even though we had never actually been husband and wife in that sense. I thought that such a plain daily routine would eventually accumulate like drops of water forming a river and slowly seep into his habits. However, a year of being together day and night couldn't compete with the news that Selena got divorced. Since then, I could often smell a faint scent of perfume on the coat he hung on the hanger. Maybe it was Selena's. And that was not all. One night, I had an acute gastritis attack. I had run out of medicine and was curled up in pain on the bed. For some inexplicable reason, I took out my phone and called him in a rather sentimental mood. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through. I almost dropped my phone as I was so startled. Let Jason answer the phone," I said, forcing myself to endure the pain. "He's taking a shower. If you have something to say, just tell me." Taking a shower? Was this woman Selena? What were they doing? Please let him answer the phone." My lips were bitten white. Then she called out, "Jason, someone's calling you." I waited quietly. A few seconds later, Jason's voice came from the other end. "Hello. Jason, when will you be back? I have something to do tonight. I can't come back." "Who is that woman?" "Luna, be good. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm in pain." Before I could finish speaking, he hung up. Throughout the whole night, Jason didn't call me again. As the pain gradually subsided, I slowly fell asleep. The next day, I went to his office to bring him lunch. He wasn't there. When I was putting the lunchbox on his desk, I accidentally caught sight of a document. The 5 big words, "divorce agreement," came into view. I took a closer look with a glimmer of hope, only to find that it was drafted for me. Right, of course. We got married back then because of a moment of pique when Selena got married. Now that Selena was divorced, he must have thought about getting a divorce immediately. So many years had passed. I thought his tenderness and being moved were real. I thought I had gradually become important in his heart. But compared to her, I was just like a single hair compared to 1,000 June, a very heavy weight in ancient Chinese measurement. I don't know what kind of mood I was in when I returned home. After that day, he never mentioned this matter again. And I was the same as before, except that I no longer had any expectations in my heart. I was still too confident, thinking that I could pull him out of the abyss and become his light. But in the end, I was the one who plunged myself into an even deeper darkness first. Perhaps, I couldn't save him, nor could I save myself. Then let it be as he wished, so that we could both part with some dignity. 03 Miss, we're here. The driver's words brought me back to my senses. I nodded, paid the fare, and got out of the car with my suitcase. I originally had my own house. But after marrying Jason a year ago, I moved to his place and never came back here. I found the key and opened the door, then carried my luggage inside. By the time I had settled down, it was already noon. I didn't plan to go out for lunch, so I ordered takeout. During this time, Jason didn't contact me again. I thought he probably had gone to find Selena. I twitched the corners of my mouth. Suddenly, I felt thirsty, so I was going to go downstairs to buy a few bottles of beer. Just as I opened the door, I saw 2 people standing in front of it. "Luna." Lucy's voice was a bit choked with sobs. Before I could react, she rushed over and hugged me tightly. "You didn't even discuss such a big thing with me first. Do you think I don't exist?" I froze for a moment, then patted her back gently and coaxed her, "I just didn't have time." I looked at Stephen standing behind her and asked her, "Why did you bring your little brother here too?" "He insisted on coming with me." I looked at him in confusion. He nodded, seemingly confirming what his sister had said. Come in first. I touched Lucy's head and let go of her. It seemed that I couldn't have that beer now. I could only let them in first. Luna, did Jason cheat on you? Lucy asked indignantly as soon as she sat on the sofa. I shook my head. I don't know. If he dares to cheat on you, I'll kill him. Lucy said viciously. Forget it. We're getting divorced anyway. It's okay. Instead, I ended up comforting her. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Stephen, who was sitting aside, was unusually quiet. He was just looking at us quietly. I wanted to ease the heavy atmosphere, so I asked him, when did this little kid grow so tall? He chuckled. We just met a week ago. I laughed awkwardly. This kid, couldn't he tell I was trying to change the subject? Lucy grabbed my hand again. Luna, you can't just let him get away with it. If he really cheated on you, can you just swallow this? What can I do if I can't swallow it? She sighed, seemingly unable to come up with a good solution either. Let Stephen beat him up. She suddenly said. I couldn't help laughing. Is that what a younger brother is for? Do you need it? Stephen suddenly spoke up. His pitch-black eyes stared at me unblinkingly. Huh? Need what? To beat him up? I was shocked. Yeah. He nodded casually. What the hell? Are you serious? What's the big deal? He smiled indifferently. I've wanted to punch him for a long time. Lucy chimed in again. He really deserves a beating. Jason is just a bastard. I quickly waved my hands. Please spare me. Lucy suddenly started sobbing. Luna, I know you always keep things to yourself and wrong yourself. But as your best friend, can you talk to me about things in the future? Don't make me worry about you every day. My heart softened when I saw her crying. I handed her some tissues and repeatedly said yes. Crying so miserably. Others might think it's you who's getting divorced. I teased with a smile. Who's like you? Always trying to be tough. Lucy glared at me. Sis, don't you have to go to work? Stephen suddenly reminded her. Oh, right. I almost forgot that I have an important client to meet this afternoon. After saying that, Lucy thought for a moment. Work is not as important as you. I'll ask for leave to be with you. I quickly stopped her. No, don't. I'm really fine. Look, I'm okay. I have to go with him to handle the divorce this afternoon. I don't have time to be with you either. You'd better go to work. Sis, you go. I'll stay with her. Stephen said. You? Can you do it? Lucy looked at him. I also looked at him. He nodded without changing his expression. Then you have to be on guard against Jason. Don't let him play any tricks to hurt Luna. Lucy repeatedly told him before leaving. Okay. He got up to see Lucy off and closed the door. What would you like to eat? I'll cook for you. I looked at my watch. It was time for lunch. Since there were people at home now, it wasn't appropriate to order takeout anymore. I'll cook, he said. I stared at him with wide eyes. When did you learn to cook, kid? He pursed his lips. A long time ago. About 2 years, I think. Good for you. I gave him an approving look. But you're a kid and a guest. I'd better do it. As I was about to get up, suddenly my wrist was grabbed. I turned around, looking at him in confusion. He had grown very tall in the past 2 years. Judging from his posture, he was probably more than a head taller than me now. What are you doing? I asked, looking up at him. Have you not cooked enough after cooking every day for more than a year? He frowned slightly. Huh? Luna, how long are you going to keep pretending? It was the first time he called me by my full name. I froze. My fingertips turned white from squeezing so hard, but I still asked, what are you talking about? He looked down. If you want to cry, just cry. There's no point in pretending to be tough. I was shaking all over. Since I fully realized that these 2 years had been just my one-sided wishful thinking, I had been suppressing my feelings and not letting them out. I was never the type to break down and cry or make a scene. How could I lose my composure in front of a kid? He seemed to see through my thoughts. He sighed and his tone softened. Sister, don't hold it in like this or you'll get sick. I don't know if it was because of his caring tone or something else, but suddenly I felt like crying. The moment my eyes started to turn red, he easily turned me around by my shoulders and sat me on the sofa. Then he got up and went to the balcony. I cried with great force, as if I wanted to let out all the grievances of the past 2 years in this one cry. I had always hated those people who would start crying and whining every time something sad was mentioned. So I only gave myself this one chance to cry. I would cry as painfully as I could and then completely let go. Only then could I remain calm when it was brought up again in the future. I don't know how long I cried until finally I couldn't make a sound anymore. I wiped away my tears and remembered that Stephen was still there, so I walked towards the balcony. As soon as I pushed open the glass door, I saw his back leaning against the balcony railing. The sun was shining brightly, casting a layer of light on his outline, just like a movie scene. Suddenly, I remembered that the first time I saw him was also in a similar situation. Since Lucy was already very beautiful, the thought that her younger brother wouldn't be bad-looking either had been rooted in my mind. But I was still stunned when I saw him for the first time. His face left a deep impression on me back then. I walked over, and a smell of cigarette smoke hit my nose. I coughed slightly from the irritation. He suddenly turned around and, seeing that I had come, he crushed the cigarette between his fingertips. Kid, when did you learn to smoke? I glared at him. He thought for a moment and said, for a year. 1 year. Another year. I remembered the year I was married to Jason and couldn't help but sigh. He suddenly bent down and stared intently at my slightly swollen eye corners. Had enough crying? I nodded. I remember you're the kind of person who can completely let go of the past once you've cried enough. His voice was a bit hoarse, probably because he had just smoked. I didn't know why he suddenly said that, but I still nodded. He sneered. Then don't let me down, sister. After saying that, he casually threw the cigarette into the trash can 2 meters away and then turned and went to the kitchen. Knowing that I couldn't persuade him otherwise, I just let him cook. Unexpectedly, not only did he cook quite well, but he also took care of washing the pots and dishes after we ate. I was sprawled on the sofa, listening to the sound of water coming from the kitchen. Suddenly, I understood Lucy's happiness. Just then, Jason's call came in time. I picked up the phone. I'm downstairs at your place. Okay, wait for me 5 minutes. After hanging up the phone, I was about to go downstairs when Stephen suddenly called out to me, Sister, should I come with you? I was stunned for a moment and then smiled. Forget it. What would it look like if you came along? He spread his hands helplessly. Lucy threatened me before she left. She said she'd beat me to death if I didn't follow you. I thought about it. Since we were getting divorced anyway, there was nothing to worry about anymore. So I nodded and agreed. When I went downstairs, Jason had already rolled down the car window. That face that I had loved for 5 years suddenly appeared in front of me. For the first time, I noticed that the surging love in my heart had a tendency to subside. Who is he? His voice was tinged with a bit of anger. I glanced at Stephen behind me with his hands in his pockets and then turned back to Jason and said, a handsome guy. Then I heard a suppressed chuckle coming from behind me. Jason's face darkened. Luna, we're not divorced yet. I nodded. Yeah, that's why we're going to get it done now. He stared at me for a few seconds and then sighed. Luna, get in the car first. As soon as I opened the passenger door, a pungent smell hit me. It was Selena's perfume. I wrinkled my nose almost imperceptibly. Stephen behind me seemed to notice my hesitation, so he took a step forward and bent down to sniff. Sister, the smell in this car is really bad. Let's go in my car. He had a casual, devil-may-care smile. Luna, don't go too far. Jason's voice carried a hint of hidden anger. I pretended not to hear and turned around to follow Stephen to the underground garage. Only when I was out of Jason's sight did I feel like I could breathe a little easier. God only knows how tightly I had been squeezing my hands when I was talking to him just now. Calm? How could I really be calm? Whether it was love, disappointment, unwillingness, or resentment. The feelings that had accumulated over the years couldn't be let go just like that. It was just that there were no more ripples in my heart, and it didn't seem to matter whether I could let go or not. When we arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Stephen stayed in the car consciously, leaving me and Jason to go in alone. "Luna, are you really sure about this?" Jason frowned, as if he was suppressing something. Suddenly, I laughed. "Jason, our situation this past year hasn't been much different from being divorced." He was silent. When we were about to leave after finishing the formalities, he suddenly called out to me again. "Luna, nothing happened between me and Selena." At that moment, his phone rang. He was just about to hang up when he saw the caller ID. Then he gave me a complicated look and picked up the phone. It must be Selena. I shrugged and left without saying goodbye. Holding the divorce certificate and walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I felt free for the first time. Stephen was leaning casually against the car door, with a cigarette in his mouth. There was a girl standing next to him, and it seemed like she was asking for his WeChat. I stopped in my tracks, not wanting to disturb these young people. But as soon as he looked up, he saw me. Then he pointed at me to the girl and said with a light smile, "I like divorced women." The girl looked at me in shock, then at him, and then turned and walked away. I walked up and snatched the cigarette from his mouth. "If you don't learn good things every day, you'll get beaten up if you keep smoking." He looked down at the cigarette in my hand, and his Adam's apple bobbed slightly. "If you don't like it, I won't smoke anymore." After saying that, he opened the car door for me to get in. The traffic on the usually congested road was surprisingly good today. Every intersection was a green light, and the car could move almost without any obstruction. My mood also became cheerful. Stephen was driving while looking at me in the rearview mirror. He seemed to want to say something but didn't say anything. I asked, "What do you want to ask?" He smiled. "Sister, you're single again, right?" I nodded, but suddenly had a bad feeling. "Can I court you then?" My mind exploded. "What?" I said, "I want to court you." He repeated it in a hoarse voice. I looked at him in shock. "I told you not to act like a delinquent. Why are you still doing it? Do you know what you're saying?" He nodded. "I know. Your rebellious phase should be over long ago." "What, are you going through menopause so early?" "Sister, I'm 20. He sighed. "So what if you're 20? You're still a kid." "Yeah, a kid wants to court you. Do you agree?" He asked again. "Are you crazy?" I looked at him in disbelief. "Yeah, I've been sick for a long time." Are you serious?" I couldn't be more serious. His voice sounded a bit helpless. I looked at those beautiful eyes in the rearview mirror, opened my mouth, but didn't say anything. 5 days after the divorce, it happened to be a weekend. I drove to the outskirts to climb a mountain by myself. When I was a kid, whenever I was unhappy, my dad would take me to climb mountains. After so many years, I had kept this habit. When climbing the mountain, I didn't listen to music. I just quietly listened to my own breathing rhythm and counted my steps until I reached the top of the mountain. From childhood to adulthood, I had always believed that nothing couldn't be obtained through effort. I could be the top student in my grade, solve the final and most difficult problem on the math test paper, and turn the tide in the free debate of a debate competition. As time went by, I forgot that some things couldn't be forced after all. And Jason, finally, became someone I could meet but not ask for, could meet but not keep, could meet but not possess. At this moment, the scorching sun on the mountaintop was shining brightly in my eyes, and suddenly, I seemed to figure it all out. People should invest more energy in things that won't let them down, like studying, like working, while for some things that can easily render all your efforts in vain, like relationships, don't go all out. Such an obvious truth, and I didn't fully understand it until now. I was just feeling about these years when I was so blind. Suddenly, my phone rang. I opened it and saw it was Jason. Why was he calling me? I was hesitating whether to answer it or not when my finger accidentally touched the answer button. I could only pick up the phone and put it to my ear. "Luna." His voice sounded a bit hoarse. Yeah. Why didn't you come back to cook? I could tell that he was probably drunk. Jason, we're already divorced. Divorced? What divorce? Luna. His voice started to come out in bits and pieces. I sighed. Jason, don't drink during the day. You might get beaten up. Luna. Are you concerned about me? Do you still love me, right? If you're out of your mind, go to the hospital. Drinking won't cure you. I didn't want to get entangled with him. Don't be like this. Luna, don't be angry anymore, okay? I really didn't do anything with her. It's none of my business anymore. I'll say it again, we're already divorced. After saying that, I hung up the phone. Then I thought it might not be appropriate, so I opened my phone again and directly switched it to airplane mode. The sun on the mountaintop was so blinding that I squinted and basked in it for a while before preparing to go down the mountain. When I drove back home, I found Jason sitting at the door. He looked so dejected, and I had only seen him like this when Selena got married. Are you happy now? I asked the me from a year ago in my heart. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept well. When he saw me coming, he immediately got up and staggered towards me. I stepped aside to avoid him. Jason, what on earth do you want? He looked at me with slightly red eyes. Luna, don't abandon me. I sneered. You got the roles reversed, right? You should be very clear in your heart about who abandoned whom. He grabbed my wrist. Luna, I really didn't do anything with her. Don't leave me, okay? Come on, man. Are you putting on an act here? Weren't you quite decisive when we got divorced? I thought I would be calm too. His eyelashes were already amazingly long, and now with his eyes downcast, there was a suffocating sadness. But just one day without you, and I can hardly breathe. I know you don't understand, and even I myself can't understand my current behavior. But even after trying to calm down for so many days, the only clear thought in my muddled mind is that I don't want you to go. I found it rather ridiculous. Jason, when you got together with me on a whim, when you married me on a whim, and when you drafted the divorce agreement, you should have thought of this ending today. The divorce agreement wasn't drafted by me. His voice was a bit weak. I never thought of getting divorced from you. I just wanted to live a good life with you. It's just that I only understand my own heart now. What was going on that night when you didn't come home and were with Selena? What about the perfume smell on you during that period? There were so many questions in my heart that I wanted to ask, but when the words came to my lips, I couldn't bring myself to ask them. Forget it. I realized for the first time that having a conversation with him was such a tiring thing. You're just not used to my leaving now. Don't exaggerate it into love for me. He still refused to let go. Sister. A familiar voice rang out. I turned my head and saw Stephen standing halfway up the stairs. What are you doing here? I asked. He walked up a few steps with a smile and came up to me. I'm here to court you, aren't I? Jason's face looked a bit ugly, and his eyes were full of hostility when he looked at him. I didn't care about him. So I grabbed the corner of Stephen's clothes and said to Jason, if you have nothing to do, just leave. I'm going back inside. With that, I opened the door and pulled Stephen inside. Jason suddenly held the door. Luna, can you not let him in? I grabbed the doorknob. If you don't let go, I'll slam the door on your hand. He looked at me, despair filling his eyes. Please. Suddenly, I started to sigh. Truly, things have come full circle. I never thought that the day would come when I could turn the tables on him, like when I was the one begging him to come home in a humble way. Stephen suddenly grabbed his wrist. It's really hard to hold back. What? Jason frowned and tried to shake him off. I think I knew what he was going to say next. Holding back from hitting you. Sure enough, I quickly grabbed Stephen. No, no, no. He turned his head and glanced at me, then forcibly pulled Jason's hand off the door frame and directly closed the door. Is sister feeling soft-hearted? Stephen sat on the sofa and looked at me quietly. I shook my head. Liar. He gave a teasing smile. Don't overthink it. I just don't want to get myself into trouble. I gave him a sideways glance. At this time, my phone rang again, and the caller ID showed Jason. I directly hung up and turned off my phone. Steven laughed. Is this the man you liked? Used to like. I emphasized, what did you like about him? It was really hard for me to say. Did I like him because he was good looking? Because he was good at studying? Because he was gentle? Or something else? After such a long time, it seemed that I had forgotten how I fell for him in the first place. After a long silence, he was the first to speak. Sister, look at me. I looked over at his voice. His hair was fluffy and slightly curly, looking a bit lazy and sleepy in the sunlight. Which of the things you liked about him don't I have? He spoke softly, but each word hit my heart like a thunderbolt, with great force. Are you serious? I asked. What do you think? His long and slender eyelashes were curled with light and shadow, casting a faint shadow under his eyes, like an angel in a medieval European oil painting. What do you like about me? I still couldn't believe it. It's not that complicated. He smiled. Everything about you. Does that count? I twitched the corners of my mouth. Does Lucy know? Yes. I sighed. Steven, we're different. At your age, you should go and have a few relationships. I already need to carefully consider my remaining life. I only want to have a relationship with you. He stared at me until I didn't dare to look at him anymore. The kind that leads to marriage? He casually picked up the tea I had made and took a sip. Yes, the kind that leads to marriage. Oh no, I panicked. I thought it would be easy to discourage a kid, but I was losing ground with him. Am I getting simpler as I grow older? Or is he just too complicated? Wait. I thought of an excellent reason. I cleared my throat. Do you think your family will accept a divorced woman? Good. His face froze for a moment, almost imperceptibly. I knew this trick worked. I seized the opportunity and pressed on. How long do you think a relationship not approved by parents can last? How old are you now? Can you guarantee that this isn't just a passing fad? If you get tired of it later, I'll be the one getting hurt. At my age, how long can I play around with you? How long can I wait for you? Have you considered these things? He looked at me quietly. Are you done? I nodded. Only then did he slowly speak. First of all, my mom married my dad after getting divorced. They have no objections to this at all. Let alone Lucy. Are you satisfied with this family background, sister? Lucy and I have been good sisters for so many years, but she never told me about this. Secondly, I'm a person of long-lasting affection. And, I'm greedy and never know when to stop. I've never been one of those who lose interest in you quickly. I only have loyalty that increases minute by minute. Finally, I'm 20 years old, 1.88 meters tall, weigh 70 kilograms, in good health, with no bad habits, no dating history, and no family disease history. He said as he turned his head and glanced at me with a faint smile. If you're willing, we can get the marriage license in 2 years. I blushed instantly. Compared to his laid-back look, I felt a bit embarrassed. How could I, an adult, be charmed by a kid? I clearly saw myself choking and spitting blood until I died in his clear and bright eyes. Is this still the kid who used to be bullied by me until he sat on the ground and wailed? I started to regret it. Later, I called Lucy and asked her to take her brother away. I've just walked out of a grave and still haven't fully recovered. I don't want to think about these things immediately. I just want to focus on working well for a while. But when he left with a big smile and told me he would wait for me, I actually felt a shameful flutter in my heart. The next day after work, I was blocked by Jason again. He was driving a black Bentley, parked at the entrance of the building, holding a bouquet of baby's breath in his hand and wearing a white shirt. I remember telling him a long time ago that I liked seeing him in a white shirt the most. I didn't expect him to still remember that. But now, looking at him, I somehow thought of another person who also liked wearing white shirts. Pa, why am I thinking about that kid? I quickly shook my head. A handsome guy squatting downstairs with flowers in his hands attracted quite a few onlookers. I wanted to pretend not to know him, but he still caught me. Luna, come back with me. Jason, if you like Selena, then live a good life with her. Don't keep pestering your ex-wife like this now. I emphasized the word ex-wife. Sure enough, his face turned a bit pale. Luna, I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. I'm already quite relieved that you didn't actually cheat on me. I don't have any demands on you. Just don't come looking for me anymore in the future. Looking at him like this, I didn't feel any sense of revenge at all. I know that he's just gotten used to my presence and my kindness, so he can't get over it in a short time. He'll understand after a while. Jason, I think I've made myself clear enough. First of all, the person you love is Selena. I hope you won't make a fool of yourself with me anymore. Secondly, you don't love me. You're just used to me. That's why you came back to look for me when I suddenly left. You should see your heart clearly. Finally, Luna, never go back on my word. Whether I still love you or not, I won't make the same mistake again. After saying that, I looked at him calmly and, as expected, saw the panic in his eyes. My mood for the whole day was ruined by him. When I got home, I went straight to take a shower. I fiddled with the shower switch aimlessly until I gradually relaxed in the fluctuating water temperature. I don't know how long I showered. My hands had already started to wrinkle. I turned off the shower head and walked out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around me. Just then, my phone rang appropriately. I picked it up and saw it was a WeChat message from Selena. She added me 2 years ago because of Jason. What was she messaging me for? Luna, are you free tomorrow night? I'd like to invite you to dinner and have a talk. What was there to talk about between her and me? Besides Jason and divorce, what other common topics do we have? But thinking about Jason's sudden attentiveness these days, I thought it was still necessary to talk to her and ask her to keep an eye on him. Okay. I replied. 05 I thought about it. Last time when I got divorced, she cried so much because I didn't tell her in advance. So this time, I directly took a screenshot of the chat record with Selena and sent it to her. I lay on the bed and waited quietly. 2 minutes later, my phone rang and I picked it up. Luna, are you going to see that ugly woman? Lucy has always been offensive when referring to Jason and Selena. She either calls them dog man or ugly woman. Yeah, I didn't want to go at first, but Jason has been a bit abnormal these 2 days, so I think it's still necessary to meet her. I heard from Steven that stupid man still dares to pester you? Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with him. He's really cheap. Lucy, don't you have anything to confess to me? There was silence on the other end for a while. After a long while, she said sheepishly, "What did you say?" "If you don't say, I'll hang up." "Don't, I'll say, okay?" She sighed. "I only found out that Steven liked you when you got married. But you were already getting married at that time, so I didn't say anything. On the night of your wedding, I went to the toilet in the middle of the night and found him sitting on the balcony smoking. I was so angry that I wanted to go and teach him a lesson, but then I saw cigarette butts and beer bottles all over the floor, and his eyes were horribly red. I've never seen him like this before. The last time he cried was when he broke his leg playing on the horizontal bar when he was 5 years old. His voice was really hoarse. He asked me how he could forget someone. That's when I realized that he had liked you for so many years. I thought he would be able to let go after you got married, so I just let him be, but I didn't expect that he had been thinking about you all the time. I was just saying why this kid hadn't been in a relationship for so many years. So he was waiting here all this time. After listening to her, I could only remain silent. Luna, shall I go with you tomorrow? She asked. No need, I'll go alone. No, what if that ugly woman makes things difficult for you? She shouldn't be that kind of person. And what can she do to me? No, I didn't go with you last time. This time I must go with you. Both of them, the sister and the brother, are quite persistent. I knew I couldn't persuade her otherwise, so I agreed that I didn't expect that he had been thinking about you all the time. At night, I suddenly couldn't sleep. Lucy's words kept echoing in my head over and over again. I got up and went to the living room to pour a glass of water. Suddenly, I remembered that Steven didn't seem to have come to look for me these 2 days. Had he given up so quickly? Somehow, I felt a bit annoyed. Thinking about meeting Selena tomorrow and Jason, who might come to block me at any time, I felt even worse. Because of insomnia, I was really listless the next day. As a result, I drank almost half of the coffee that was supposed to last me a week in one day. A divorced woman, TSK, really scary. A female colleague who had always been at odds with me said in a sarcastic tone. I don't know who first found out about my divorce, but it spread in our company. But considering that I was in a higher position than them, basically no one gossiped about it, except Serena, this woman who was being sarcastic to me. Because Lucy's family was in business and quite wealthy, since my first promotion, she had suspected that I got the promotion through improper means, relying on flattering the boss. I don't know how many rumors she had spread behind my back. It's not that she didn't know I had a 985 degree. It's not that she didn't see my serious working attitude. She was just jealous, just not convinced, just envious. This is a kind of abnormal phenomenon. All women complain about the unfriendliness of the workplace towards women, but some people never thought that in the end it was they themselves who were fueling the fire. I gave her a sideways glance and didn't say anything. What does her divorce have to do with you? Have you finished sorting out the files? Another female colleague came to my rescue in time. I smiled at her. Because I had an appointment with Selena in the evening, for the first time, I didn't take the initiative to stay and work overtime. I left on time when it was time to go. As expected, Jason came again. I was walking out with a group of colleagues when I saw him still wearing a white shirt, standing there. I pursed my lips. Before I could say anything, Serena started again. Isn't this Luna's ex-husband, the president? He's really handsome. Someone whispered in admiration. I was thinking quickly in my mind about how to escape when he had already walked towards me in big strides. Luna, I've thought a lot these days. I have something to say to you. His tone and eyes were very sincere, but my heart was already calm. I don't want to listen. I've said that I don't love you anymore. I hope you won't pester me anymore. Jason's face was pale and vulnerable, as if he was seriously hurt by my words. President Luna, you should have a good talk with him. You're really picky if you don't want such a good man. Serena suddenly said. A wave of nausea rose in my heart. I hated this situation. Jason's face and Serena's voice made it hard for me to breathe. Somehow, I suddenly missed Steven. It would be nice if you were here. Luna. It was Lucy's voice. I looked over subconsciously. Lucy was walking towards us, alone. I felt inexplicably disappointed. Lucy immediately took my arm. How dare you keep pestering her? Seeing this, the colleagues behind us left tactfully. Serena gave us a deep look and then left too. I happened to be meeting Selena. If you have something to say, you can come along. I said to Jason. Why are you meeting her? Jason frowned. She asked to meet me. His frown deepened, as if he was thinking about something. Don't waste your breath on him. Let's just go. Lucy grabbed my hand and walked away. When we started driving, I couldn't help but ask, where's your brother? Lucy was stunned for a moment and then smiled ambiguously. What? Do you miss him? I was choked. What? I was just asking. I haven't seen him for a long time. She laughed even harder. We saw him less than 2 days ago. How is that a long time? I remember you didn't act like this when you didn't see him for a week before. What? Don't talk nonsense. Luna, your face is red. I subconsciously touched my face. Sure enough, it was a bit hot. Really, so embarrassing. Luna, don't tell me you like him? Lucy's voice had a hint of expectation, just like how I usually get excited about a couple I ship. No, no such thing. Seeing that I was both shy and angry, she stopped teasing me. These days are the Cuba Level 2 League. He's representing University A to play against University D. If the flight isn't delayed, he's estimated to be back as early as tonight. Uh-huh. I responded, but my tone carried a hint of disappointment that I didn't even notice myself. Lucy gave me a meaningful look in the mirror and then continued driving. When we arrived at the place, Jason's car also stopped behind us. He still followed us. Well, it's okay. Let's just get everything straightened out at once. When we entered the reserved private room in the restaurant, Selena was already waiting there. The moment she saw Jason come in, her expression stiffened for a moment. Jason, why are you here? Jason directly found a seat and sat down, his tone a bit impatient. I came to see what you want with her. She smiled a bit awkwardly and said to me, Luna, can we talk alone? No. Lucy was decisive. Miss Zhou, just say what you want to say directly. They're not outsiders, are they? I said. Her face turned a bit pale, but she still maintained a proper smile. Then I'll just say it directly. Since you've already divorced Jason, I hope you can break off completely. After all, Jason and I are already together now. What are you talking about? Jason looked at her in disbelief and then turned back to explain to me, Luna, don't listen to her nonsense. I'm not with her. Break off completely? I'd like to, but ask him if he's willing. I said bluntly. Jason, how could you do this? We're clearly already together, aren't we? Selena said pitifully. Really disgusting. Lucy said lightly towards Selena. Jason, since it's like this, you should see clearly that there's no possibility between you and me. Luna, it's not like that. I've never been with her. I was just helping her with her divorce lawsuit. Jason, you didn't say that before. Selena, don't be pushy. Suddenly, the two of them began to argue, each sticking to their own version of the story. It was the first time I had seen Jason speak to Selena in such a tone. I was almost shocked to the point where my jaw nearly dropped. Although I no longer had any feelings for Jason, I still chose to believe what he said, even though he had been cold to me. He wasn't the kind of person who was a habitual liar. If he said he wasn't having an affair and was just helping out, then it should be the case. Jason, I believe you, but there's no possibility for us anymore. Do you understand? I said. Luna? Jason? Don't you love me? Why are you running to Luna now? Selena finally couldn't help shouting at him. That was in the past. I love Luna now. You're really cheap. Lucy almost rolled her eyes to the sky. So, you came to see me today to ask me to stay away from Jason, right? I broke the atmosphere in a timely manner. Yes. She admitted straightforwardly. I don't know what good tricks Miss Luna used to make Jason unable to leave you. As far as I know, you were with another man these 2 days, right? You're really good at playing both sides. Damn it. I could hardly resist the urge to pull her hair. Watch your mouth. That's my fucking brother. Lucy got so angry that she stood up immediately. Selena, I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Jason looked at her with disbelief in his eyes. Selena seemed not to have heard and continued, You're keeping Jason on the hook while seducing your good friend's brother, Luna. I really underestimated you. I really wanted to go up and rip her mouth apart. Thinking like this, I had already stood up. Selena, will you stop it, okay? Jason glared at her with a look of disappointment. What? Dare to do it but not admit it? Selena's voice was already trembling a bit as she saw me approaching her with an angry face. Suddenly, the door of the private room was opened with a bang. The next second, Selena's chair was kicked hard. She was caught off guard and almost fell off the chair. Stephen? Why are you here? Lucy looked at the person standing beside Selena in shock. Jason's face was very dark. What are you doing here? Stephen didn't answer either of them. He just looked at me with a big smile. Sister, did you miss me? My heart skipped a beat. Luna, how can you say you're not playing both sides? Selena seemed to have caught something on me and pointed at him to ask me. So noisy. Stephen impatiently kicked her chair again. It seemed that he kicked even harder this time. She didn't sit firmly and managed to stand up just in time by grabbing the corner of Jason's clothes beside her. Let go of me. Jason pulled her hand away with a hint of disgust. The sudden attack had left her a bit shaken. Selena got up in fear and hid behind Jason. How can a man hit a woman? Tisk. Stephen looked at her leisurely. What should I do then? I like hitting women the most. 06 He was really just the same as always. I knew he wouldn't hit a woman, but if I didn't stop him, he might go and hit Jason. Although I also really wanted to beat her up, I still ran over and grabbed Steven. Don't. I looked up at him. I'll just say a few words and then leave. Then I turned to face Jason and them. Jason, I don't hate you, and I don't love you anymore. It's not only cheating that counts as harm. A person's enthusiasm can be exhausted. After 7 years of giving without getting a single bit of return, do you think I can still afford to love? My feelings for you have been completely drained. From now on, we'll go our separate ways. I also wish you happiness. As for Selena, I don't know how you have the nerve to show up in front of me. Isn't today's outcome between me and Jason all because of you? Don't blame others if you can't hold on to him yourself. By the way, I used to practice Sonda. I hope you'll be sensible and don't show up in front of me again, or you'll be responsible for the consequences. After saying that, I waved to Lucy, signaling that she could leave. When I went out, Jason didn't come to stop me again. I thought that he'd probably finally realized and gave up. Thinking like this, a stone in my heart finally fell to the ground. When did you get back? Didn't you say you'd only be back tonight? Lucy asked him as soon as she got in the car. I missed her. Steven inserted the key without looking up and started the car. I quickly lowered my head, afraid that they would see my flushed face in the rearview mirror. You're really my good brother. You forget your sister once you're about to get a wife. Isn't it that I haven't got her yet? He laughed. If you're like this before you get married, what will it be like when you do? After saying that, she seemed to realize that I was still sitting in the back seat and added, Hey, did you hear that? If someone doesn't let him marry her, he'll probably die alone. I lowered my head even further, wishing I could find a crack to hide in. Seeing that the atmosphere was getting increasingly strange, Lucy finally couldn't bear it. Forget it. I'll get out and walk by myself. You sent her. With that, she opened the car door and got out. Don't. I quickly stopped her. How can you walk by yourself? I happen to have to go to the company to receive a client in half an hour. It's just up ahead. You two go ahead. Lucy left without looking back, and Steven cooperatively didn't stop her. I clicked my tongue. She was really a good sister to her brother. Going home? Steven suddenly turned around and asked me, Yeah. I said in a voice as soft as a mosquito's hum, Sister, you haven't answered me yet. He suddenly said, What? I looked up blankly. Did you miss me? Suddenly, my heart seemed to be hit precisely by a sniper, trembling twice and then continuously. For the first time, I realized that this sentence could have such a powerful impact. Yes. I said softly, looking down. Before I finished speaking, the car suddenly started to move towards the roadside and then braked sharply. Just as my head was about to hit the front seat, a hand had already protected my forehead. What did you say? His voice was slightly trembling, as if he couldn't believe it. I looked up carefully at his face in front of me and said it again. I said I missed you. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he said, Don't tease me. I'll take it seriously. Looking at the shock he was trying hard to suppress in his eyes, my heart suddenly softened into a puddle of water. I'm not teasing you. I really missed you. There was a suffocating silence. Did I say something wrong? I suddenly felt a bit panicked. Do you know that this sentence is easy to be misunderstood? His suppressed voice was really nice, making my hair stand on end. There's no need for misunderstanding. What I mean is that I seem to have fallen in love with you. No, not seem. I have fallen in love with you. I thought for a while and said this. Then there was another silence. Don't lower your head. Is it that embarrassing to like me? The ending tone rose, with a bit of laziness. He had always been charming without even realizing it. It seemed that he had just been distracted for a short while and now had regained that casual yet determined look. I thought I couldn't lose, so I was about to raise my head, but then the back of my head was grabbed. Before I could recover, he kissed me. The atmosphere in the car instantly became romantic. The whole world seemed to be filled with his presence surrounding me, drowning me. He kissed me clumsily but fiercely, like a wild beast that had been hungry for days and finally found a piece of meat. I could hardly breathe, but he never stopped. Forget it. I didn't want to struggle anymore. The scalding temperature of the young man spread inch by inch through our intertwined lips, wrapping me up completely, as if I was in a warm winter quilt, feeling comfortable both physically and mentally. Stephen finally, like a fire, burned away all my gloomy past and reignited my long silent heart that had been throbbing. For this, I'm willing to chase it forever and even die for it. Many things became clear almost instantly. Perhaps it could have been like this before, but now with him by my side, I feel that everything is no big deal. Jason sent me a very long WeChat message saying that he had never cheated on me. The divorce agreement was drafted by Selena. He wanted me to back off knowing it was difficult. He said that he had always been in love but didn't realize it. He said he was sorry for me, having enjoyed my love with a clear conscience but hurting me again and again. He said he would let me go. I just felt a sense of pity when I read it. This relationship was the mistake of both of us from the beginning. He shouldn't have accepted me when his heart wasn't empty. I also shouldn't have been willing to fly into the flames when I knew he couldn't let go of someone in his heart. After all, we were both not mature enough. One didn't dare to face himself, and the other didn't dare to bear the consequences. In the end, we missed each other in a hurry. But there's nothing to regret. Actually, we weren't that suitable for each other. When I received this WeChat message, I was watching Stephen play a game at University A. It was a round of 16 match, and it was their home ground. They played very easily. Down in the stands were the tireless cheers that came in waves. Most of the cheers were from Stephen's little fangirls. Their voices were so shrill and high that I was almost driven crazy. I seriously suspected that they were shouting so crazily because Stephen kept glancing at the audience during this short break, making the girls behind me think that Stephen was looking at them. Although I admit that I was also excited, but I'm already an adult, so of course I couldn't be like that. So I could only suppress the urge to cheer for him and sit there as steady as a mountain. During the halftime break, the players on both sides went off the court. Soon, my phone rang. It was a message from Stephen. Beside the vending machine in Area B3. As if receiving an order, I immediately went down from the stands and followed the signs to find the location he sent. I thought that with my terrible sense of direction, it would take me a long time to find it. But there were hardly any people outside the main hall, and he was so tall that I saw him almost at a glance. "Aren't you going to take a break?" I trotted over and asked. He ruffled my hair and said, "I missed you." Wow! Suddenly, several boys wearing the same basketball uniform as him appeared behind him. They should be his teammates. Amid the jeers and whistles, I lowered my head in shame. Realizing that I was shy, he chuckled softly, pressed my head against his chest, and then turned to the people behind and said, "Get lost and go cool off somewhere." Those guys immediately scattered. A few of the bolder ones even teased as they left, "We're not even allowed to look?" Stephen is so stingy. To be able to win over Stephen, who has stayed away from women for ages, sister-in-law is really something. Didn't you see that during the break, Stephen's eyes were fixed on the stands? It turns out sister-in-law is here. The voices grew fainter, but I felt my cheeks getting hotter and hotter. "Okay, they're gone," he said softly, looking down. I still didn't dare to look up, afraid that he would see my bright red face like a monkey's, but, "Be good and let me give you a kiss." His voice was extremely seductive. I looked up blankly, and then he pecked me on the lips. "You? Shameless." I was a bit annoyed. "What do I need a face for?" He answered as if it were a matter of course. I felt my face getting even redder. It was always like this. After we got together, he became bolder and bolder, flirting with me at every turn, making me, a 25-year-old old auntie, act coy like an 18-year-old girl all day long. "Oh, okay, you'd better go back quickly. The game will start again soon." I pushed him hard. "Then give me another kiss." He didn't move, looking down at me with a smile in his eyes. You're pushing your luck. If you don't kiss me and a university loses, What will happen? Isn't this also your alma mater? He sounded so innocent. Feeling both shy and annoyed, I could only tiptoe and gently press my lips against his. Go quickly. I kicked him on the calf. Wait for me to finish the game. He dodged with a laugh. When I returned to the stands, the players from both teams were successively entering the court. The moment Stephen entered the court, screams erupted all around, and even the host couldn't help teasing, "It seems that our number 5 from the school is really popular." It was okay if he didn't say it. But as soon as he did, the whole stadium started chanting "number 5" in unison. Was it really necessary? It seems that not watching basketball games in college was really a big regret in my youth. Stephen seemed not to have heard it and was just talking to his teammates. The second half of the game was more exciting than the first. The opposing team seemed to have adapted to the environment and began to try to catch up. But after Stephen made 3 consecutive three-pointers, the score gap widened again. The whole stadium went crazy, shouting Stephen's name nonstop. The conversation between 2 girls behind me drifted into my ears. "Stephen is really handsome." Of course. The man I like, how could he not be handsome? The game ended soon, and as expected, a university won. When I was looking for him among the people leaving the stadium, I found that he was surrounded by several girls asking for his WeChat. It was really a familiar scene, but I wasn't as calm in my heart as before. Before I could get angry, he had already noticed me. He beckoned to me, and I obediently walked over. But the girls had surrounded him tightly, 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. I couldn't squeeze in at all and could only stand outside, anxiously waiting. "Please make way." Stephen's voice was indifferent in a way I had never heard before, cold and hard. But the next thing he said made me extremely ashamed. "You're blocking my view of my wife." My blood rushed to my head immediately. I nervously lowered my head, looking for a crack in the ground to hide in. Before I could find one, I was scooped into his arms by a pair of arms. "Sister." I looked up and saw that he had already walked up to me. The group of girls were standing there, looking at us in shock. There are so many people. Let me go first." I whispered. "Shy?" he asked. I nodded, and then suddenly I was picked up horizontally, and my head was buried in his chest. It wasn't until I felt that we were almost out of the gymnasium that I dared to peek at him secretly. The sun was blinding, and he was smiling freely and brightly. My boy has always been as bright as spring sunshine, as passionate as the blazing sun. Postscript: I never regarded Stephen as a man before. After all, I watched him grow up from running around naked in the street to being over 1.8 meters tall. Like Lucy, I had regarded him as family a long time ago. When it comes to family, the sense of gender is a bit blurred. But I didn't expect that he had ulterior motives towards me. There were fewer courses in junior year. After we got together, he came to see me almost every day. At first, I even lectured him to study hard since he was about to take the postgraduate entrance examination. But then he said, "I've been recommended for postgraduate study," which left me speechless. When I was with Jason, I was inferior. This inferiority continued even after I was with Stephen. One day when he was cooking at my place, I suddenly rushed into the kitchen, hugged him, and said emotionally, "You're so nice. How can I be worthy of you?" He was stunned for a moment and then said with a smile, "Coincidentally, that's what I thought too." I was immediately surrounded by an inexplicable sense of move. Why would he think like that? He was clearly good at everything. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he put down the spatula, turned around, and hugged me tightly. "Sister, do you know that your high school math teacher was also my math teacher?" I nodded. I knew this. After all, we were almost like siblings back then. "He liked the students of your class very much, especially you. He often mentioned you in class. Once when he was explaining a final and most difficult problem, he said that this problem was quite difficult and it was normal for us not to be able to solve it." I was quite unconvinced at that time. Do you know what he said next? I shook my head. He gently stroked my hair and said with a smile, he said that if Luna were here, she would definitely be able to solve it. You have no idea how proud the old man looked when he mentioned you. Since then, whenever I encountered a tricky problem while doing exercises, I would think that since you could solve it, I could too. He chuckled softly as he said this. Later, I learned a term called imaginary enemy. I realized that I had been competing with the you in my imagination for 3 years. I really didn't know there was such a past. Sister, never underestimate yourself. Before you knew it, I had been following in your footsteps for a long time. So long that I almost thought I would never be able to catch up with you. I don't know when I started to cry. I almost forgot that I used to be the pride of my teachers and family. No one can be smart all the time. You don't have to blame yourself for that failed marriage. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just a little confused. He suddenly looked down and said, "Stop crying, or I'll kiss you." Even his tone of threatening me was gentle. I cried even harder in an instant. "Stephen, I love you so much." He hugged me even tighter, and his tone was extremely gentle. "Yes, I know." At that moment, when my boy was hugging me, I finally understood what it meant to be that life was worth living. It turns out that there really will be someone whose appearance can make you forgive all the hardships fate has dealt you before, and even make you feel extremely lucky. I used to never believe in fate, immortals and Buddhas, or predestination. But looking at the reflection of myself in his eyes at this moment, I want to say, if there really are gods in this world, I will bow down piously and offer my loyalty for all its deprivations and gifts.